Uh,
Hi, I'm Glenn Whipp with the Los Angeles Times. Thank you for joining us today for this live video chat with the Emmy nominated Harry Hamlin from Mad Men. Harry, welcome.
all right, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Well, it's summer. It's midsummer. I'm in a place where the fishing is great, and my kids are having a wonderful time playing in the water and having just a classic summer. So there you go.
Outstanding, outstanding. What a wild ride this has been for you, and being an Emmy nominee for Mad Men for a part that literally began with you not knowing what the character was, whether you'd work for more than a day.
That's right. When they first called me up, they said they could only guarantee a day's work on the show. And I asked them, well, okay, I love the show. Who am I playing? And they said, well, we can't really tell you. And I said, is there a script? And they said, no. And I said, is there some pages? And they said, no. So basically, it was a leap of faith on my part. And we've all heard about those leaps of faith that we take in our lives from time to time. Although this one wasn't very dangerous, in fact. I mean, I wasn't standing on a cliff about to jump over into the unknown. But it was a leap of faith in that I normally don't work under those conditions. So I'm glad that I took the job. Very glad.
Did you need a little persuading from your wife, who was like, Harry, I read a quote where you were saying, yeah, she said, Harry, it's Mad Men, you gotta take it, even though you don't know anything about it.
That's very true. It's very true. I had met Matt Weiner a few months before for another part, which was called The Swinger Boss. And it was actually it was a nice part about a guy who wanted to go swinging with the people from the agency. And I liked it. But I met Matt. We talked about that role. I didn't get it, I thought. And then when this came up, it was out of the blue, and I said, I don't usually work for just one day on something, even though it's Mad Men. And my wife said, well, what you doing next Thursday, which was the day of the job. And I said, well, actually, I don't have much to do that day. She said, well, then why don't you do it? And I thought, well, what the heck? I get to meet some interesting people, and why not? So, and I did, and I met some interesting people, and then I kept working, and then it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it just kind of ballooned from there.
Yeah, ultimately it turned out to be a bigger part than the Swinger Boss, right?
Much bigger part than
Yeah.
Swinger Boss. Yes, and yeah, no, and you never know. I mean, I don't know who this guy is to this day, so he might end up being part of the swinger crowd as well. So I might get to kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was thinking back to the character. Doesn't Jim Cutler say at one point he refers to my wife, right? But
Yes,
we never see him wearing a wedding ring.
no, I don't wear a wedding ring, and I asked them about that early on. I wanted to know as much as I could about the character, and they were not forthcoming. Um, and so I had to kind of create this guy from scratch, from nothing, and I built him based upon the tiny bits of information that I had. And the only thing that came from Matt Weiner when because I saw him on the set. He came to the set the first day I was working, and I pulled him aside. I said, Matt, who is this guy anyway? And he said, well, the only thing you need to know is that he's continental. Um, and so I took that and I ran with it, and I went back to my house and I looked in the Oxford English Dictionary, which I keep in my library, and I looked up the word continental to see what it meant exactly. And in fact, the word continental does not in any way refer to human beings. And it's not an adjective that refers to the mannerism or the way a human being might act or even might be from. Continental refers to a shelf, out in the ocean, the continental shelf, and it refers to huge land masses, of which there are seven. It refers to a kind of wine, apparently, that a kind of grape that grows somewhere on the continent, but it has no reference whatsoever to being, a way that a human being might act or behave. So I had nothing there really, and I ended up just kind of going on the fly, trying to create the guy. And then each week I would find out something new about him. For example, that he was in the Air Force. I found out one week. So that gives me something to chew on. And then I found out the next week that he had a wife who had had her breasts cupped by some client. Whether or not that led to a divorce between me and my wife, I don't know. Or whether or not I'm still married, I don't know. Or I don't know anything. There you go.
But you would find out like little scraps from, you didn't go back and ask Matt for a different word besides continental then, I
No, I
guess.
didn't. I didn't. But I think what I found out is that there was a sketch on Saturday Night Live where there's someone who refers to himself as Mr. Continental, I think, and I think in that case it's someone who kind of wears a scarf around his neck, maybe, and maybe maybe he opens doors for women a lot. You know, maybe he drinks fine cognac. I don't know.
I think the word is urbane, maybe.
Well,
Would that
that was,
be
I
it?
mean, had he said I was urbane, I would know what to do, but I still have no idea what to do. So, and the fact that I have an Emmy nomination is just very odd to me, very strange, considering that I really just showed up for work on time and tried to have all the words memorized, and here I am talking to you. So it's just life is a box of chocolates.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe continental has something to do with showing up kind of to the office. That last scene Jim Cutler's in on the final episode of Mad Men this season, he comes in with Roger and Joan to fire Don, and he's wearing just he's really rocking a turtleneck there on Thanksgiving Day.
Well, it was Thanksgiving Day, and I mean, the clothing, by the way, just the opportunity to wear that clothing in and of itself is a gift. And I'm blessed to be able to wear such beautiful clothes on a weekly basis on the show. So I mean, the whole thing is a blessing from start to finish. What can I say?
What did you think of that turtleneck when it was presented as the costume there for kind of the off day that you'd be coming in?
Well, I love wearing turtlenecks, and we don't have them. We don't have an opportunity that often to wear them anymore. I have a closet full of them, and I never wear them. And I guess it was kind of a '60s thing. I remember in ads for Tareyton cigarettes. I think the guy always wore a turtleneck. So yeah, I mean, it was Thanksgiving Day, and it was a very small turtleneck, by the way, and it barely. I mean, I had to be poured into it, but it looked good. So that's all that matters.
Yes. That I guess that last scene with Jim and the partners being there, sending Don off. I mean, throughout the season, that's the one thing you do know about Jim Cutler is that he likes power, or he is about kind of negotiating, making sure that his power remains either constant or growing within this merger of the company.
I believe you're right about that. And that's the one thing he does like to be in control, and he likes. He's a power monger for sure, and he has interesting ways of making sure that he has the upper hand. Uh, and I love that about him. And he has a little cabal within the agency, and he relies on them to make sure that his little plan gets carried out. And I guess I mean we no one knows what's happening next. I mean it's quite an interesting cliffhanger, and I'm just as much in the dark as anybody else.
Right. I mean, you don't know whether you'll be coming back probably for next season, or do you? Do you know?
No, I don't. I have no idea. Um, I certainly would love to come back. It's a wonderful place to work. The people are great, and certainly the words that I get to say, and the clothes that I get to wear, and the people that I get to say the words to, make it an extraordinary experience. So I'd love to do it again.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you would guess that provided that they don't, that Matt doesn't jump several years ahead for the next season, that Jim would still be there, that the agency would still be roughly the same. You know, maybe Don would be back, maybe not. We don't know.
No way of knowing. That's true. So it's kind of like life, isn't it? There's no way of knowing.
Yes. Did you when you went in for the initial audition, were you a regular fan? Did you watch Mad Men regularly? Was this a show that you had admired from afar?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. There was a point when Mad Men was off for a year, uh, and I kind of lost track for that 16 months or whatever it was, but I got right back into it. And now with the way people watch television, it's a matter of downloading all the episodes and just binging on them, which is the way I and my family like to watch television now. And I have a feeling that that's the future of TV.
What's the last show that you and your family binged on?
Well, I mean, we unfortunately we don't binge on the same shows at the same time. Um, my wife is going
Different
through Breaking
tastes.
Bad right now. She's completely and utterly addicted to that. She's in season 4 of Breaking Bad. I did House of Cards recently. I did Game of Thrones recently. I did The Killing recently. I mean, it's an endless potpourri of binging on television these days.
And I read an interview with you where you're saying that you were kind of feeling like it was time for you had taken some time off to raise your sons, but you're kind of feeling like it was time now to go back to work. Um, Now you wouldn't exactly guess that it would have been Mad Men that you would be a regular part of, but this was a time where you were ready to kind of go back into acting on a more full-time basis.
That's right. I did when my second family was born. My daughters, in fact, I have a son who's 33. When my second batch of kids was born, I said, you know, it's time for me to really be a dad now and concentrate on my kids and my family because really, when you get right down to it, that's the legacy. And so and the business moved out of LA. Right around the same time that my kids were born, we had this exodus from Los Angeles and Hollywood, and the business moved to points east and south and north and kind of left. So but I decided to stay, and I did. I created a couple of other businesses during that time that had nothing to do with the film business. But I kept acting. I kept going to class. I kept doing plays from time to time, and then did from time once in a while I did Curb Your Enthusiasm, for example. I did Army Wives for a season. I did I did uh, 3 or 4 shows. I think Curb Your Enthusiasm was one, and then Shameless did that for a couple of seasons. But just bits and pieces of this and that. Nothing that took me out of LA. Veronica Mars I did for 2 seasons. I loved that. But mainly I wanted to concentrate on these other businesses and on my family at that time. Worked out.
Yeah, yeah, good. I guess the episode from Mad Men this season that everyone kind of remembers and talks about, and what's odd that it's an episode that you have that personal connection to, and that was when Jim Cutler brings the doctor in to give the energy injections to everyone on the staff there.
That's right.
And my God, I mean, when you talk about not getting these scripts, so you don't know anything before, really, and you're just kind of finding out about the character, that must have been kind of a trip to read that script and maybe and tell people who might not know the story about your connection with this particular type of energy injection or whatever, what it was called. Uh,
What was called
Wake up juice.
well
Wake
in
up
in
juice.
my family it was called hangover juice. And it was a guy named Dr. Max Jacobson back in the 60s he had come over from Germany just before the war, I believe. And he was a doctor and a chemist, and he created this, what he called vitamin cell therapy. And a book was just published, I think within the last 3 months, called Dr. Feelgood, which is a book about this guy. And it just so happens that my family became involved with him because President Kennedy was taking this stuff before he was elected and during his presidency. And in fact, Dr. Jacobson credits his formula for getting Kennedy elected, which is a little bit of a stretch. But on the other hand, the stuff was pure methadone, and apparently Kennedy was injected with it just before the debate, the first televised debate with Richard Nixon, and that debate Kennedy won hands down, and of course Dr. Jacobson credited his formula for giving Kennedy the upper hand in that debate, and then therefore that led to him winning the election, blah blah blah. But my father was in the space program, and as you know, as we all know, Kennedy had the great moment in history when he said we're going to put a man on the moon in 10 years, and then Kennedy believed in this formula so much that he had all the people working in the space program on it. My father being one of those people. So my father from the late 50s through the early 60s, all the way till he retired in the mid 60s, he was taking this stuff, and I think even beyond. And my mother then became addicted to it. It was methamphetamine mixed with vitamin B12 and B6 and all these things, and it was a nasty smelling stuff. And I would have to shoot 2 cc's of it into my mother's buttocks every morning if my father was in Cape Canaveral watching a rocket launch, and he wasn't there to shoot her up. I'd have to do it. So anyway, when I read the script and I saw that this doctor was coming in and it was this stuff, I went to the producer, I went to Matt, and I said, it's so ironic that I'm the one bringing this in, and I grew up with this stuff in my house. Uh, so it was kind of one of those strange, ironic moments.
You could have been the onset advisor for this.
Well, I did, the color of it was it wasn't quite the right color that they had, and I said, the stuff was a little more kind of brown. They had a kind of gray stuff, and of course, there may have been more than one doctor prescribing this stuff, but Jacobson was the most famous, and he was in New York, and I imagine that this stuff really was the Jacobson formula that they were referring to in this.
Did your father, like when he was initially taking this, did he have any idea what was in it, or was it just like The Office there in Mad Men? Everybody just kind of lined up and kind of said, "Oh, it's just it's just an energy thing."
Yeah, but Jacobson never mentioned that there was speed in it. It was vitamins,
Right.
and it was a kind of a vitamin therapy that you took, and he always said this will make you feel great, and it sure did. I mean, my mother and father would wake up bleary-eyed in the morning, and they'd shoot themselves up with this stuff, and then they were up and they were moving around like crazy. So, little did they know that basically they were, speed freaks at that time. So, and then I think Jacobson he was called out by the AMA, and I don't know if he spent time in jail or not, but he was definitely persona non grata in the medical establishment after they found out what was in it.
Are you stoked about returning to the Emmys again after a while, man? It's been after LA Law days.
I think
It's changed a little.
it certainly has changed. Back when LA Law won as many Emmys as Mad Men, at least in terms of the best drama. That LA Law won 4 times for best drama, and Mad Men has won 4 times for best drama. So I did spend a considerable amount of time at the Emmys back in those days. That was in the late 80s and early 90s. In those days, for one thing, we would go and I would present every year at the Emmys, and we got a little card that said, "Thanks for coming." And that was it. I understand now that they get trips to Tahiti and things like that. So or at least they did. I think actually that day may have come and gone already, because I think that people realized that people were getting a lot of free stuff and they needed to pay tax on it. Now that's over. So it very well may be, like, once again, just a little note that says thanks for coming. So I'm okay with that.
You you missed that window of swag there, huh?
I may have, but you know what? Yeah, swag is essentially high price clutter in the long run.
What do you remember besides the little card about those times going in the 80s with LA Law? All right, if I looked and Googled Harry Hamlin Emmys, would I see some really good tux fashion there, or what were the tuxes like in the 80s? I know the hair was big.
Well, the whole thing was different. In those days, for one thing, the Emmys were on Fox, and Fox was a nascent network then, didn't have much of a viewership. Fox had decided that one of the ways it was going to grab an audience was to get these events like this. And so um, there weren't these big parties that they have now, and a lot of the tabloid television that exists now didn't exist in those days. So you didn't have a lot of fanfare around the Emmys, like you do today. And there was certainly, we also went to the Golden Globes every year, and there certainly wasn't a lot of fanfare around that at all. Sometimes people would get together and go to Trader Vic's afterwards for a drink, but that was the only party that took place after the Golden Globes. Now, of course, it's a big cause celeb. I mean, and why not? Why not have a big party? I guess it's any excuse is better than no excuse whatsoever.
Yeah, now you have to really like almost steel yourself for that red carpet gauntlet, and there's so many different media outlets that you got to be ready to walk that. Are you gonna be working out for that, preparing
You mean
mentally?
push-ups and sit-ups, etc.? No, my
It's more
wife.
of a mental.
I I'm married to a woman who is is an expert at the red carpet, and she's been on it and interviewing on it for years, and so I have no thoughts about the red carpet is just another day.
She'll be able to help with that.
I'll hand it over. I'll let her do all the talking. She'll know exactly what to say. I never know what to say, so I'll just sit there and I'll let her have all the limelight.
Well, it's been good talking to you today. I appreciate your time and thanks for coming by.
No, it's my pleasure. Absolutely, absolutely.
Congratulations again on the Emmy nomination.